another beautiful day. Good to have you on ATM Blowout. ATM Blowout is a syndicated live program of the network here. We hold conversation on special interest topics to bring you news, events, and stories through correspondent reports, experts' opinions, and stakeholders' analysis. Today on ATM Blowout, our first point of call, we're taking off from Edo State. Clerics bless Deputy Governor's new office. On November 11, ICPC warned youth against vote buying and violence. On narcotics, the University of Abuja makes drug tests compulsory before admission. On security, group asks NJC to relocate election appeal hearings to Abuja. FCTA, Wiki plans Women Affairs the Directorate in partnership with First Lady. On insecurity, reps to investigate underlying causes of banditry in Northwest. And of course, we'll bring you another story coming from the Human Rights Association of Nigeria, where they're asking the Supreme Court to, either sack the president or compel him to resign, following the issues of alleged identity thefts and forgery. But we have Ambassador Ernest Roland T. Douglas. He's an environment expert, health and safety expert as well, but he's here this morning speaking to us as a social political analyst. Oh, of course, he's also a politician. We'll come back to you after the break.
Every day, our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders, politics.
Nobody's ambition is what's the blood.
I have fought very firmly.
Natural occurrence, war, and the world economy.
I belong to everybody, and I belong to nobody.
ATN covers it all on ATN Politics today.
Brother, good to have you back. We'll get on with the stories. We're going to start from Edo State, but before then, let's get to welcome our guest on the show today, Ambassador Roland T. Douglas. Good to have you here.
Good morning, and good morning, viewers. My pleasure.
How you enjoying the prosecution processes and the trials from US to Nigeria?
Well, it's been quite an adventure, if I have to put it that way. And,
did you learn that the FBI is about to release about 2,000 or 5,000 page documents on our president?
Yes, their institutions work, so I won't be surprised if they don't do that.
Does that scare you?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think I'm not the only one.
Absolutely. In fact, the fallout at this moment is that there are the nurses now that have been relocated to the US and Canada are now
I saw that video.
are now being target of investigations.
Yeah, I heard that lots of them came with forged documents.
Forged documents, and some texts were done at proxy, and so you see, it's what we don't realize is the negative impact this has generated globally. I receive calls from relations, from friends, all over, and they're like, man, we are now on the front burner on every issue. So there seems to be a deliberate attempt now to review a lot of people that are out there. And it's so sad.
I saw a post and someone said that if he's in Nigeria, don't worry, that they are something of forgers.
No, but you see, this narrative must change because it's not peculiar to Nigeria alone.
How do you change it? This man is our president, for instance.
Fair enough.
He is the number one citizen of this country. Yes. How do you change that?
And I expected that we should have applied similar scenarios that we have. I mean, the Speaker of the House of Reps in the U.S. just resigned on mere allegations.
Yeah.
In Kenya also, there is a minister that resigned, just a mere allegation. But this one, you're having a lot of things, and then, we're not even looking at the moral aspect.
All right, let's start up what we have. We'll get there before the end of the show.
Sure, definitely.
We'll get there because Hariwal is not finding it funny either. But let's get to Edo State, everyone. The Deputy Governor of Edo State, Philip Shaibu, is still moving to his new office on number 7 Dennis Osadibe Avenue as some Reverend Fathers left the building yesterday. So the governor had last week in a statement said he had forgiven his deputy after Shaibu publicly apologized to him a few days earlier for instituting a suit against the governor, the State's House of Assembly, and others on alleged plot to impeach him. It has always been the practice of the deputy governor to invite priests to his office for prayers monthly. When journalists visited the office yesterday, workers were still seen fixing the ties in the compound, while the few staff in the office were seen going about their duties in the norm. Now, Shaibu, who is at the peak of the crisis between him and Obaseki, got an official letter directing him to the new office, but many observers thought with the public apology and the acceptance by the governor, maybe Shaibu's location from his original office just beside the governor's would no longer be necessary. You saw the picture of the prayer section where the priests were blessing the process. Okay, so I guess he said to move into the office officially, the new office officially right now. So like those in the reports, let me also ask you, because I was also thinking by now, when Obaseki came out to say to forgive is human, to forgive is divine,
and then
to err is human. So I was thinking that by now, Obaseki would have gone, or Shaibu would have gone back to his office, and now the organizers of the annual events that he gave the deputy governors of would now be asked to use this particular office as theirs. But that seemed not to be the case. I'd like to bring you in here.
Well, it's not the first time we're having this experience. In fact, as we speak, Ondo State is also having a fair share of this same crisis that we've seen. But I think, this is time we have to rejig our constitution, where a constitutional role should be, given to the deputy governors. And then this will minimize the kind of distraction, because the state, is bigger than the governor and the deputy governor itself. But they've taken a better part of the productive time fighting, personal issues, which shouldn't be. But if the constitution is being rejected based on all these anomalies that we're seeing, lately, I'm sure, for the dividends of democracy in the individual states, we should have some kind of synergy. In Bielsa, the governor lost because his deputy had, forgery issue. So if they have a joint ticket, why should the governor play this, holier than thou kind of administration with his deputy?
Well, they said that the constitution gave them that much power to do what he's doing. But another angle to this is, does the governor actually understand the impact of this to the Edo people? Like you said, everyone knows it's a joint ticket. What it means is that Edo people gave them that mandate to go become their governor and their deputy governor.
Absolutely.
Now, he's now using the fact that he has some level of leverage from the constitution to sideline or determine what happens with deputy governor, disregarding the facts now that it's about Edo people collectively and not about his emotions or what the deputy governor's emotions. Coupled with the fact that this man has apologized publicly and you have accepted the apology publicly as well. So one is wondering then, at what point is it okay for one to say that he should go ahead and do what he wants to do without recourse to the fact that that seat, that office that he occupies, that Shaibu occupies, belongs to Edo people and not them single-handedly?
You see, I expected the Edo people, especially the critical stakeholders like the elders, the traditional rulers, to also advise the governor that, look, we are in a democracy, we are not in autocracy. You don't, because of personal individual differences, run the state aground. The joint ticket implies that they both have those same privileges and rights, and so should be respected. We've seen in the past, the issues they've had when they were on the other side of the party, and there was intervention from other people, and that was resolved when they moved from their APC into PDP. I mean, sometimes we should have some kind of sense of history and say, look, both of us had come this far. If it's okay for you, and he also, indicated interest, that shouldn't degenerate to the point where governance was thrown to the backside, and then the governor and the deputy governors are now beginning to ridicule the people of Edo State. And so the critical stakeholders should get up and advise them to please stop this drama, this distraction that is ongoing. They've got a lot of big issues there. We know that they have flood issue. We also know that they also have these terrible road issues.
Yes,
those should be the focus, not this, individual demonstration of who has what level of authority or not.
And this is almost 8 years, talking about the bad roads and how embarrassing that have become.
These are issues that Edo people want to resolve, not this individual, the personal issues that they're displaying, in public. It's unacceptable for me.
Another aspect of this that just crossed my mind is that, okay, so if the deputy governor is here to resume office in the new building that the Osadebe Street, one is not wondering, does it mean he has not been working all along? He has not been playing his role as a deputy governor all along?
Absolutely, that's what it implies. Otherwise, I expected that in certain functions, especially when they had that, the youth protesting due to the bad roads and some other issues they had, the governor wasn't there, so I expected that the deputy governor, should have played that role. But you could see that the governance has been sidelined. The governance of Edo people have been sidelined, and now it's an individual. The two gentlemen are, more focused on who is going to take over, and that is unnecessary. It's a distraction for the Edo people.
All right. With the warnings coming from the PDP to the governor and the other stakeholders saying you need to check it, there are things that is important for Edo people right now. One is beginning to wonder, will the Edo State governor consider to do the needful and respect the people of Edo State? Or is it going to be just about he who has all the power? All right. that will be for you and for the Edo people to decide. Now, let's talk about something else real quick in Kogi State. Youths in Kogi State have been warned to desist from vote buying and violence before, during, and after the forthcoming governorship election in the state. The Resident Anti-Corruption Commissioner, Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, Ulu James Okoro, gave the warning on Wednesday at a Kogi Youth Town Hall meeting where the Charter of Demand by Kogi Youth was also presented to the gubernatorial candidates in the state. The ICPC was represented by the agency's principal superintendent of operations, Sipi Nathaniel. The Resident Anti-Corruption Commissioner noted that the ICPC, pursuant to its mandate of eradicating corruption in the country, will be fully involved in curbing electoral corruption in the forthcoming elections. Said, we promise that we will again deploy all available resources to monitor all forms of corrupt practices during the November 11 governorship elections. Be a good Kogite, he said. Be patriotic and distance yourself from any electoral malfeasance and have your peace of mind. Okay, speaking of electoral malfeasance right now, you're basically saying if a candidate offers you ₦1 million, for instance, or ₦1 billion, for instance, if you may, and it's okay, vote for me, get your people to vote, you're telling the person not to take the money, right? That's votes. Supposedly stay away from vote buying.
Yeah.
Now, okay, that's fine. May I also ask this ICPC man how much attempts the commission had made to ensure that I'm not saying people should collect money legally, by the way, but I'm just saying, what attempts have they made to ensure that the palliative sent to Kogi State has been judiciously distributed to who should receive it, and how much of that ₦2 billion is being implemented where with due diligence there in Kogi State? Because how do you put people in a vulnerable position or situation and tell them that they shouldn't take the Esau's, the Jacob's, is it Jacob's porridge now?
Jacob's porridge, that's what it is.
Yes. So that they shouldn't take Jacob's porridge. How do you do that?
You see, unfortunately, we seem to be having amnesia of what has just transpired in February and in March. ICPC was there. And, all this malfeasance was so obvious. I mean, there are videos and photographs of all these vote buying issues during the presidential election in Kogi State. And there were even killings. Not one person has been arrested, taken to court, and prosecuted. And you see, once there are no deterrents, and once there is no public indication of certain people, have been prosecuted for such acts, then it will just be an academic exercise. Keep telling the same people that are so vulnerable, so below poverty, not to see money and not to take it. One is not justifying the fact that this is going to happen. But this is the reality with us. And so you have cited a good example. They've just gotten palliatives. Who has monitored it? They've asked them. Even Serap has gone that extra mile to say, listen, we need to know what exactly is going on with the distribution of the various palliatives. And so, good as it may that they are drawing their attention, but I think they should go beyond that and show publicly that there are certain people that have been persecuted from these acts, so that will become some kind of deterrent to those who probably share in the feeling that, look, if I'm being offered money for that services, I'll be glad to have it because I'm in such a vulnerable, below the poverty line in this country that such things cannot just be wished off.
Because we're talking about people who are willing to take 200 naira to sell their vote, as a matter of fact. And now, with the level of vulnerability that people are faced with in this country, how do you tell someone not to do A, B, C, D? Again, looking at it from the angle of INEC right now, and what played out in 2023 the elections earlier this year, do you think we have enough voter education such that we create the right paradigm in the minds of Nigeria when it comes to vote buying?
I can tell you for free that right now there is a general apathy towards any election in Nigeria. And it will surprise you that the turnout in these elections of November in the 3 states will be so profound in action that you realize that, look, INEC at this current trust deficit and at this current apathy that Nigerians have, actually have that extra effort that they need to put up to convince Nigerians resident in these 3 states that the elections are going to take place to be interested in this election. And then, of course, from the way the judiciary is handling this, there is this, unwritten encouragement that violence is going to be, it has come to stay. Because a lot of people in other states are making references where certain personalities were seen on viral videos committing these crimes, and nothing has happened to them. Such people are still walking free. And of course, what you see is going to have a lot more impact than what you're being told. So I think that, a precedent has been set, and if there are no consequences for some of these actions, it's going to be a real huge task convincing, the electorate and the supporters of these individual politicians in their political parties not to go through this route.
Now, speaking of voter education, we have about 4 years to the next general election. At what point, in your opinion, do you think that voter education needs to commence if we are looking at having the right kind of paradigm created in the minds of Nigerians when it comes to elections?
It actually should start from now, but I'm sure it's when the presidential election and the tribunals and the state governors' election tribunals have been closed out. That's when Nigerians will now have to sit back and review, their interests. So with the general party, I think this is the time National Orientation Agency and then some of the media and most of the media houses should kind of have some kind of collaboration and begin to regenerate certain level of interest and also begin to convince Nigerians that, yes, what we have had just the immediate past is not what it has come to be, because we now have technology. And so what we really need to do is to have the right set of people who are going to man this independent National Electoral Committee to start the sensitizations, because they have to do it to tell Nigerians that, yes, with an apology of what has just passed, and then begin to synergize with the National Orientation Agency, with the media houses like yourselves, and then commence now. So the Nigerians should now begin to reorientate their mindset towards future elections.
All right, thank you. Let's just get to Abuja. This is a very interesting conversation there. The Vice Chancellor of the University of Abuja, Professor Abdul Rashid Ala, says students who intend to study in the university must undertake and present a drug test before admission process is complete. Professor Ala said the institution is interested in knowing students' drug status so to be able to help them to be free of drug abuse. While speaking at the 27th pre-convocation briefing on Wednesday in Abuja, he said they were working with the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency to help students who are involved in drug abuse and to rehabilitate them not to become nuisance after graduation. While noting the efforts made by the university to achieve its mandate, he said the varsity has embarked on fundraising from alumni, philanthropists, and also identifying foundations that will help in sponsoring research, training, and others. How critical is it that we are having this conversation from one of the universities in Nigeria right now?
For me, this is a good policy, but it's going to be abused.
How do you mean?
When you say students have to undergo this drug test, I can tell you for free that it will give probably the security men there and maybe some of the personnel to now make it some kind of a fun drive avenue. When we talk about drugs, it's in all facets of our society today, from the politicians at the top to even some of our security men are involved in all this, directly or indirectly. And so, yeah, it's a good start, but you'll see that it's going to be abused in the sense that most of these students and the guys who go through this test for the admission process will now want to play a backhand deals of probably paying money. And it's going to be now those who can pay more that may be waived off from this test. And I mean, we've got past issues where some of these things have been advocated, and midway, it closed out very embarrassingly. There was a time it was suggested that from the National Assembly, all these politicians at those levels should also undergo drug tests. Where did we ended up with? So policies we are good at, but when it comes to implementation, it's always abuse. And that's why I feel that, they shouldn't breach the rights of the students who are coming in there. They should have their own way of identifying amongst themselves those who are involved in these drugs, and not to subject, students into this. I think it's a breach of right, and it shouldn't be encouraged, because definitely it's going to be abused as well. That's my take.
When you say it's a breach of rights, have you considered the level of narcotics abuse in this country right now, especially with young persons? Have you been on the road, like you're not driving, you're walking in the street or on the road, and then someone just accosts you and you think he's a mad person, but at a close look you discover that this person is actually not like supposedly mad? Of course, having some level of psychosis, but not like literally mad. And then you ask questions around and tell that person is on drugs. Now, if you have idea that this is what is going on and how much abuse of narcotics in terms of trading itself we have in our society today, and then the impact of this to the minds of the young people who are supposed to be in the university, you still think that is abuse of their right to say this is compulsory, considering the impact?
Look, the youths have access to a lot of media. And if you look at our, Nigerian movies and some of these foreign movies, these drugs are being glamorized. But the question we should ask ourselves is how were these drugs in the first place brought into this country? Were there not institutions, people with the constitutional responsibility to checkmate this? Okay, those that are internally within our system, how have we been able to, mitigate its distribution process and also its consumption process? And don't forget that a lot of some of these people, youths that get into this act, it's sometimes, for them a temporary way out of their circumstances, unemployment, feeling frustrated within our society. And so they see it as a temporary, solution to the problems that they have. So if we are really serious and we want to achieve a certain degree of cleansing, then we have to start from the top. Because when you talk about these issues of drug abuse and drug availability, there are institutions that are mandated, to checkmate this.
Now let's talk about these institutions, Ambassador. These institutions will know one is primarily NDLA.
Yes.
Now, as an institution, I have consulted with them, and I know like the limitation they have, especially at least for those in Rivers State and other states that I have also spoken to. If you look at this limitation, which has to do with funding, part of what the Vice Chancellor is also asking for is proper funding to ensure that this is properly done. So part of the problem the NDLA have had over time is lack of funding. And if you look at lack of proper funding, they are being funded, of course, by government, but when we say proper funding, we know what proper funding means. If you look at that, and also the fact that there are technology that is used these days to check the excesses of narcotics, both for abusers and otherwise. If you look at the lack of proper rehabilitation centers for
the users.
Drug users. If you also look at how porous the system is that enables, you talked about that, these drugs to be out there in public domain. If you put all of this side by side, and then I want to ask, do you think that the government of Nigeria is taking the menace of narcotics as bad, as seriously as they should be taking it, considering that if you go to Angela and Rivers State here, for instance, from the environment to the staff to everything, it's you ask yourself, how
It's
can these
depressing.
people really, this depressed, how can this, then they have a rehabilitation center they also manage there. How can these persons really do? So do you think the government of Nigeria is actually doing the needful to ensure that such institutions are properly empowered to enable them deliver on their variables?
Well, they have their own bureaucracies, but if what we see sometimes in the media, the efforts the NDLA has done, they actually need to be commended and then be supported financially, and they also should also introduce, some kind of collaboration amongst the youths from the secondary school to the tertiary institutions, where they can form what we call some kind of clubs, where some of these people will be used as, internal eyes to identify some of these people that are distributing it, and then are also using it. That to a large extent is going to help. But of course, the funding aspect, because we've got technology in all this. It's the technology that can sense these drugs, wherever they are being used and wherever they are being sold. The funding, I quite agree. The efforts they've made, it's quite commendable, and I think they can still do a lot more better. But I think they should also adopt some kind of non-kinetic approach, which is identify from most of the institutions, form some kind of clubs, some kind of groupings that will encourage these people to be on the advocacy, pedestal, and then also begin to identify the black spots within the institutions and then within our communities to help them to at least proactively mitigate this before it gets to the situation where we are finding ourselves. And of course, the government also has a duty to begin to create an enabling environment where a lot of these youth will be engaged. Because most of them go into these things sometimes out of frustration. You have this peer group pressure because they feel they're idle and they're also probably helpless within our society. And so this kind of, encourages the number of people that are getting into it. So let's also address the issues from the root cause and not just what we are seeing as a consequence of actions most of these youths are taking. But don't forget, it's not just the youths alone.
Of course.
It's all over the country. Some it is for pleasure, some it is out of frustration. And then, of course, because we glamorize it, it's becoming a real challenge. And it's not peculiar to us. But I'm sure with the efforts that have been made, with proper funding, with proper training, and with this advocacy of having youths in higher institutions, and also at the secondary school level, where most of them are also becoming very much aware, we can minimize it, but it's going to be an issue eradicating it completely.
All right, thank you so much. So a group called Niger Delta Comrades Assembly have asked the Nigerian Judicial Commission over judgments against agitations that may lead to breakdown of law and order in Delta State. The group advised the NJC to relocate all election tribunal appeal hearings in the state to Abuja. Honorable Levery Young and Honorable Hamilton Ubido, National Speaker and clerk, respectively, of NDCA, suggested on Wednesday in Asaba State that issues should be handled swiftly and carefully by the government of Nigeria, while saying that justices must be protected at all costs and the sanctity of the judiciary must be upheld at all times. The group called on politicians who have lost at the tribunals to prepare for the next round of elections rather than inflaming passions. They said elections and post-election violence is nothing new in Delta State. They also know that the best way to do this is through the protection of esteemed wigs of the judiciary. What we do not want as a group in this state is aggrieved persons hijacking the peace and tranquility currently being enjoyed in the state. There seems to be growing tension in the camp of those who lost to their opponents and the various tribunals. So he said, we look forward to the kind and swift response of the NJC's leadership in order to avert unnecessary agitations that may degenerate to breakdown of law and order in the state. The group, however, maintained that political tension is not only in Delta State, but can be sensed in some states across the country. So 2 days ago, another youth group in Abia State called on the IGP to investigate issues around Alex Oti funding, using the state money to fund Peter Obi, and then in that same meeting, they alleged that there may be violence. Therefore, the state tribunal, governorship tribunal, should not declare the result live. That they should do it via Zoom, insinuating basically that there will be issues of violence. If you bring that back to what this youth group is also calling attention to about Delta State right now, is it safe to ask if we have fared well in any way in the 2023 elections, if in October there is palpable fear that violence may erupt as a result of announcement being made by the tribunals? If you also compare what is going on in Kano State right now over the same issue.
I am really worried, and I think every Nigerian should be worried that whenever we have this election cycle, we seem to be having the same narratives. You know, these post-election violence are unnecessary. And this is becoming, more or less a tradition now because of the attitude of winner-takes-all mentality. Otherwise, election should be identifying those who are coming to serve, not going there to loot. And it's the reason why you see this desperation and you see this extreme approach to our elections. And it's time we begin to change this narrative. And I'm very sure with this 2023 election is an eye-opener because a lot of Nigerians who were initially dormant are now interested. And that awareness is going to, I'm sure, definitely make 2027 election, a huge difference. And so tribunals relocating to Abuja is not the solution. I think the tribunals should minimize technicalities that are also creating this tension and adjudicate cases as the evidences are being presented. Because there are certain, judgments that we've had in certain states that are, embarrassing, so to speak. And I think if we don't also have a judiciary to do what is right, then it's going to be a continuous process. Today you're talking about Delta, Kano own is there, Abia own is there, and several other states are also having similar issues. So let this attitude of winner takes all be played down upon. And then now let's also begin to have our selection process based on service, based on dignity and integrity, and not this winner takes all mentality that makes a lot of them to become so desperate that at all costs, people must die, property must be destroyed, just to assume office of whatever, political positions that have been made available.
Now, speaking of what measures to mitigate this whole...
should take responsibility.
That's the point. So without that responsibility being pushed to the fore, or demand being made by the NJC, for instance, to say, hey, who declared this person a governor? Who declared this person a president? The winner of the senatorial election or the House of Rep election or the State Assembly election, considering the outcome that political parties and candidates do not have the power to declare anyone themselves winner. It comes from the election umpire. Are we at the point where we begin to maybe give voice, to think we should begin to give voice to the call for electoral offences courts?
Yeah, the electoral offences court has been on the front burner for a while, but apparently because of the beneficiaries who are currently the ones that are going to also take the initiative to alter these laws, are not willing, okay? But I think it's critical to have that in the sense that they would dispense of most of these, electoral violence and minimize these challenges that we're having currently. It's also have the civil society where we can select from. We're not saying we're looking for angels, but we're saying, listen, let's begin to have people who should have certain level of integrity to man our institutions like the INEC itself. And if INEC is also not held accountable and responsible for a lot of these, anomalies that are all over the tribunal, then of course, the tribunal themselves also have their limitations because they are being overburdened with all sorts of challenges that should have been in the first instance been managed properly by INEC itself. So it's a combination of getting INEC audited and having the right set of personnel to man the INEC itself, and then also getting the judiciary to minimize the technicalities we've been hearing and seeing and adjudicate based on the facts that are being presented. There are video evidences of a lot of these, malfeasance that were witnessed. The violence part of it, the alteration of a lot of the documentations, all those things are red flags that the judiciary should, act upon so as to serve as a deterrent to the future election.
Just take a short break, everyone. When we will come back, we will go into the FCT. The FCT minister will learn is planning to set up a women affairs directorate in partnership with the First Lady. That will be our first point when we come back from the break. All right, everyone, welcome back to ATM Blowout. We still have Ambassador NST Roland Douglas in the studio. But now let's get to FCT, everyone. The Minister of Federal Capital Territory, His Excellency. Okay. Yes, Wike. On Wednesday, he visited the First Lady, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, at the presidential villa Abuja. There he sought collaboration in the planned setting while at the presidential villa Abuja, he sought collaboration in the planned setting up of a Directorate of Women Affairs in the FCT. The minister, who was accompanied by the Minister of State for FCT, Maria Mahmood, said in view of the fact that there is no Directorate for Women Affairs in the FCT, we want to collaborate with her on how to take care of women and work with her to ensure that the renewed hope agenda is achieved. He said the FCT wants to play its own role in that agenda. The minister, while seeking other areas of collaboration, also said his administration is ready to partner with the Office of the First Lady towards the drive to actualize the government's renewed hope agenda. While applauding the minister for placing premium on women inclusion, the First Lady said the efforts by the FCT administration to also develop agriculture, one of the priority areas of the Renewed Hope initiative, was a cheering development with a lot of prospects to be exploited. Senator Tinubu stressed that a broad-based implementation of the Renewed Hope agenda must not only include strategic development of the agricultural sector, but must also recognize the role of women and create an atmosphere that empowers them. Okay, this is a very interesting one. The former governor of Rivers State, like we know, he had his administration. He was one of those administrations that projected women in politics to a large extent. Now, it seems that he's not done with that. It wasn't just a Rivers thing. It seems like it's a culture for him because here he is trying to ensure that there is a Directorate for Women Affairs in the FCT. How proper is this?
Well, areas vice chairman were all women. And then, of course, his deputy was a woman. And then he had some female commissioners as well. Mm-hmm. So I think the women should rally around him and encourage him to go in this direction he's going. Because when he does this and he succeeds, it's going to project a lot of women who has gotten the talent, the skills, okay, but didn't have the space to project the relevant knowledge that they have. And also talking about agriculture, we know quite a lot of ladies are involved also in agriculture, especially in our rural communities. But if they can take up the insecurity aspect, you know, where these women are not being not necessarily molested, harassed, raped, kidnapped, and all that, then I think the women's role will be very, very pronounced in this their renewed hope agenda that they have. So we should give him credit.
University to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, who is challenging Tinubu's victory in February 25th presidential election in the U.S. court, to show that Tinubu was enrolled as a female student with the name Bola Adekunle Tinubu. Ariwa said this is a shocking and shameful case of identity theft and certificate forgery, which has exposed Tinubu as a fraud and a liar who has deceived Nigerians for decades. The rights group said Tinubu has no moral or legal right to continue to occupy the highest office in the land, having violated the constitution and the electoral laws of Nigeria. They also accused Tinubu of being involved in other criminal activities such as drug trafficking, money laundering, citing some document purportedly obtained from the U.S. authorities that linked him to these offenses. Oriwa then asked the Supreme Court not to act like Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus Christ by allowing these malfeasance to be sustained. The group said the Apex Court has a duty to uphold justice and protect the integrity of the electoral process and the democratic values of Nigeria. Ariwa also warned that if Tinubu was not disqualified or made to resign, the Nigerians would lose faith in their leaders and institutions and might resort to civil disobedience and mass protests to demand accountability. The group further called on Nigerians to rise up and reject Tinubu as their president, saying he was a potential embarrassment and danger to Nigeria and its international reputation. So I'm going to hit straight from here on now. Ariwa is saying disqualify him or compel him to resign. I don't think this is a surprise, considering the revelations coming from Chicago State, the deposition process in Chicago. So, having said that, if the Supreme Court does not see reason why the president should resign, considering all of these revelations, is it safe to say that, like Ariwa said, they have compelled Nigerians to operate in an anarchy situation, because you cannot be looking at a president that has all of this around him and say he should continue to lead while you expect them. So if the Supreme Court fails to do the needful, like they have asked them, the Supreme Court, to do, what are we looking at in your own view?
It's a disaster that is looming if the current president, with all this moral burden, does not see the need to resign. You see, Nigerians, both the supporters of the president and those on the opposition side, should look beyond the current president that is seated there. We should look at our constitution. We should look at also the morality that it's now playing out, where we must begin to have certain level of standards, certain level of integrity, certain level of personalities that should man our institutions, not only at the presidential level, but also at the governorship level, at the senatorial House of Reps and House of Assembly, in all public offices. And coming from the number one citizen, it's a big embarrassment. If all this that have been put in the public domain are true, then I expect the president to resign as a matter of morality. Because you can't carry this excess luggage and expect the citizens to do otherwise.
Now, when you say for the sake of morality, remember, the history of this certificate issue is not new. It's over 20 years. It precedes his being sworn in as the governor of Lagos State in 1999.
Yes.
Remember, we learned that the date the swearing in, he wasn't even sure, because this issue was on ground. Now, if all of these are put side by side, and we know that this has, like Hariwa said, that the president has been deceiving Nigerians for decades. Yeah. And now you're talking about morality. Does he have that moral standpoint? Does he have that integrity as a person to do the needful in this case? We just talked about the U.S.
House of
Reps Speaker. Do you think he has the morality as an individual to step aside, to resign? If the Supreme Court also fails to ask him to sack him or to compel him to resign, is there a way out of this quagmire? Because we are talking about the Nigerian nurses right now who are being accused of fudging their certificates. And this is just like from one issue to another.
Look,
do we have a system that can compel the president to step aside?
Nigerians must come together and put an end to these issues that we have right now. It's not about the president. We are talking about the constitution of this country. We are talking about the stability of this country. We are talking about the integrity within the global world, how Nigerians are being perceived. We are talking about the future of this country. And so we cannot become emotional and sentimental because we are, we have either personal or political issues with the current president, and then just sweep this off the carpet. No. The president must realize that with all this that are now brought to the public domain, by morals and also by the constitution, he should resign. He doesn't need to wait for the Supreme Court to make a pronouncement, because he is the number one citizen, not only to Nigerians, but also globally.
As we speak, we're already in the public. The issues are already out there. Because from Hariwa's point of view right now, the Supreme Court will have to either sack him or compel him. I don't know the grounds that the Supreme Court, I don't know if there are cases of criminal cases against him at the Supreme Court, why the Supreme Court will be expected to do that. Now, from the INEC point of view, because what we're looking at is forgery and perjury.
Yeah.
So from the angle of INEC right now, who actually gave this? Are we expecting INEC to make a statement considering the revelations that has come forth?
Absolutely. Because INEC, by constitution, we are privileged to have the individual profiles of every public contestant. And we also have the DSS vetting these profiles before they are being allowed to even stand for elections. And so this is the time INEC must get up and make a statement based on the informations, the documentations that they have in their system, vis-a-vis what we are now getting from the Chicago State University in the US. And, reduce this tension, this embarrassment that we're currently going through. INEC should make a statement and compare the documentations that they have. And then also the DSS should also tell us, how do they vet the political office aspirants before they have even been allowed to come and stand and participate in the elections? Our institutions must start living up to expectations, irrespective of how some of them were appointed. Because we've got a great moral body right now, and our youths are watching. We cannot at the top have this excess moral burden and expect them to act indifferently. And if you look at the demography, the youths are constituted almost 70% of our population. And it's their future we are compromising right now. I mean, the nurses right now are undergoing red flag issues just because of the fallout of this, President Tinubu's certificate issue. And every other patriotic Nigerians all over the world are being embarrassed by what is going on currently. And so, as a damage control, I will also advise, if what the documentations they are putting on publicly are what to go by, I expected that. We have a constitution, and the constitution should be applied. If the Supreme Court is the institution mandated to do so, so be it. But we shouldn't even get to that point. I think that this is a moral burden, and the political parties and those and his political allies should begin to advise him to have an alternative of having someone to temporarily now come in and preside over the governance while he trying to free himself from what is going on, because this is a huge embarrassment, and we can't continue to pretend and then trivialize it with the essence that, oh, this is political witch hunt, or these are the usual the semantics that come to play when we have big issues like this. We're talking about number one citizen. Okay, and so it's a big moral burden, and I think that he has to, on his own, step aside, and let's have someone to preside at the interim. That's my advice to him, and that's my advice to Nigerians.
Okay, it's sometimes when you have this, let's quickly look at something now, what the Constitution says about the crime that we are looking, because so we don't make it about Horiwa.
Yeah.
So we can actually focus on what the issues are. Now, I got this from a lawyer who, Barrister Henry Ekini, I don't know if you've met him, but this is an excerpt from his post, the post he made. It says, punishment for forgery is 3 years imprisonment. And then it talked about C General Section of 467 of the Criminal Code. As a punishment for perjury that's lying under oath is 14 years imprisonment. And it says C General Section 118 of the Criminal Code. From the revelation so far, because clearly President Tinubu's certificate is still with Chicago State University.
Yeah.
I read part of a large extent of the deposition so far released. Is still with the Chicago State University, and of course, he is not the Chicago State. That's the what they gave to INEC is not what.
It's not in conformity.
It's not in conformity with theirs. If you put this side by side, so we are looking at the situation of forgery
and
perjury.
Yes.
Is it enough for the Nigerian people to say, this man, you've done well, though, at least for these few months you've been in office, so let's continue with him? Or is it too much of a damage to know that our president, as it is right now, is alleged to have committed forgery and perjury, and for him to continue in office. What should we be looking at, critically speaking?
No, critically speaking, we should be thinking about the future of this country. I mean, we have a lot at stake right now, and the Constitution is there to guide us. And the Constitution has clearly stated, as you've seen, highlighted. And so we can't continue to pretend that this is a political witch hunt. We're talking about our Constitution. We're talking about the future of Nigeria. Now, issue of forgery and perjury, as highlighted in the Constitution, should be followed. Now, the question is, should we wait for the Supreme Court to make a pronouncement, or should we, as a moral burden, advise our president to step aside? And this is what we should put on the front burner, and then apply the necessary legal pressures for him to step aside, because he can't continue to sit in that office and preside over a situation of forgery and perjury, and we want to pretend that, it's a political witch hunt. It's time we begin to talk about the moral burden. I keep emphasizing that, because we've got the future Nigerians all over the world that are now being embarrassed with this red flag that is staring at us. And so I think that at this particular moment, the Constitution should succeed, and the Constitution is very clear. We don't need any special interpretations. The president and his advisors should do the needful. We don't need to have Nigerians to go on the streets to compel him to do that. The Constitution is very clear, and I think that's what we should do as well.
All right, let's quickly look at issues surrounding banditry and insecurity. That's the last bit we want to look at before we go. The House of Representatives is saying, hey, we need to do something about the insecurity in the Northwest. And now they are saying there is need to investigate the cause of the insecurity, the banditry. But let's bring that report and we'll come back.
The House notes that in the past 3 months, there has been a significant rise in banditry activities within Zamfara, Sokoto, Kebbi, Katsina, and Kaduna states. This surge in violence has resulted in numerous casualties and continued to displace a considerable number of residents. Mr. Speaker, also note that the innocent casualties of these attacks are mostly children and students. The deteriorating security in this period has further resulted in a continued displacement of many residents from the affected communities, cutting them from their means of livelihood. Mr. Speaker, also concerned that an alarming surge of abductions is currently unfolding. Observe that these grim events have not only left a trail of sorrow, but have also sparked widespread concern and outcry among our constituents, where our people feel that
it's very important to make this amendment due to the very serious security challenges we're facing also in Bauchi State. A special squad, anti-kidnapping squad, should be deployed to these areas to help in combating the security challenges.
The reason for this amendment is for us to have synergy in approach to this fight. Recently, the federal government sent a delegation to Zamfara to broker peace between Nigerians and these bandits. Unfortunately, this committee refused to the governor of Zamfara State, and they decided to do this without his consent.
the House notes that in the past 3 months, there has been a significant
because this has taken almost 10 years. We're still revisiting the same issue. We are in a society where, because those saddled with the responsibility to checkmate this insecurity are not being held accountable and responsible. So we keep seeing this same scenario being replayed. We're talking about farmers who are now being killed or kidnapped or raped, and their houses being destroyed, ancestral homes being